calling on the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, to invoke the 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. That would declare the president as incapable of executing the duties of his office and make Mike Pence the acting president. All of this comes despite President Trump having fewer than 10 days left in office, and it comes as we're learning more details about the true horror of what happened up on Capitol Hill on Wednesday. We have new video we want to share with you. We must warn you, this video we are about to show is graphic and disturbing. You can see that one rioter actually hitting a police officer with that pole with the American flag on it, and it all lays bare just how horrible, how terrible the violence was. The rioters beating police, stomping on them. In one case, as I said, hitting them repeatedly with sticks and even that pole that had an American flag on it. That was, by the way, at 4:27 p.m. Eastern. 4:27 p.m. Eastern. And while this was going on here in the nation's capital, on Capitol Hill, just 10 minutes earlier at 4:17 p.m. Eastern, the President Trump, tweeted a video speaking to those same disgusting rioters. And he said this, listen.
We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel, but go home and go home in peace.
All right, let's go to our White House correspondent, Jeremy Diamond. He's watching all of this, and Ryan Nobles, he's covering Capitol Hill for us. Ryan, first of all, you're learning new details, new information right now about the House Speaker's next steps in actually trying to remove President Trump from office. Tell us what you're learning.
That's right, Wolf. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi for the first time saying that she and her caucus are prepared to move forward with articles of impeachment against President Trump. And they're planning to do it in a unique way, essentially putting Vice President Mike Pence on the spot. They are going to offer up a resolution tomorrow morning here on Capitol Hill that will give the Vice President 24 hours to begin the process of invoking the 25th Amendment. If Pence refuses to do so or doesn't indicate that he plans to do that, they will follow up on Tuesday morning by formally filing those impeachment proceedings and beginning that process. Of course, Wolf, that doesn't necessarily mean that President Trump will be removed from office before his term ends in 10 days. It's just the beginning of that process, although there is certainly enough support by Democrats here on the House side to move through the impeachment process. The next step, of course, is a conviction on the Senate side. It's unclear whether or not Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has the will to take that next step, or even if House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will hand those articles of impeachment over once they are passed. But what we do know, the significant news here tonight, is that Speaker Pelosi is ready to move forward, and she's waiting on Vice President Mike Pence to decide what he's going to do about the 25th Amendment. Wolf, at this point, the Vice President has not said where he stands on that particular issue.
Stand by, Ryan. I want to go to Jeremy over at the White House. I understand, Jeremy, a source did tell CNN that Pence has not necessarily ruled out the 25th Amendment. So where do you think he stands on this right now? This is an extremely sensitive moment.
Yeah, and Wolf, the fact that the vice president is saying privately that he has not ruled this out yet is significant in and of itself, because what you would expect from Mike Pence after 4 years where he has been unfailingly loyal to President Trump, really trying to show zero daylight between himself and the president during his 4 years as vice president, you would expect to see Mike Pence swat away this talk of the 25th Amendment, say that it's certainly not something that he's considering or that he would ever consider, but that is not the situation that we are in. Instead, we are in a situation where the vice president and the president, their relationship is at its lowest point ever, with President Trump pressuring Mike Pence on Wednesday before inciting that mob, or as he was inciting that mob to storm Capitol Hill, pressuring Mike Pence to overturn the results of a Democratic election and refuse to certify the results of that election. Mike Pence, of course, refused to do that, instead following through with his constitutional duty. And so now you have a situation situation where President Trump and Vice President Pence haven't talked to each other since that incident on Wednesday. The president never called Mike Pence to check on him as he was in the Capitol under siege from that mob of rioters incited by the president himself. And so now we're in a very unique situation where the vice president has this power with a majority of the cabinet using the 25th Amendment to strip President Trump of his presidential powers. There's no indication as of now that the vice president is going to do that. In fact, sources have told us that it's unlikely that he will follow through with that. But at the same time, he is not ruling it out, viewing it as an option that he wants to keep on the table should President Trump's conduct become even more erratic and unstable.
And this is a huge if. If the vice president were to invoke the 25th Amendment, would there be a majority of the cabinet? I know 2 cabinet members resigned last week, but would a majority of the cabinet be ready to go ahead and remove President Trump?
Look, as of now, there's no indication that there is a majority of the cabinet that would support that. None of them have come out publicly to say that they would support that, most likely because President Trump would probably quickly fire them. But what we do know, Wolf, is that 2 cabinet members on Thursday, the day after these riots happened on Capitol Hill, I'm told that 2 cabinet members were calling other members of the cabinet to take their temperatures about the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment, and more specifically about holding a cabinet meeting to confront the president about his behavior and demand that he make some kind of public statement. Ultimately, the president, under pressure, of course, from some of those cabinet members, perhaps, but more specifically from the threat of that 25th Amendment and from the resignations he was facing from within his administration, he did release that video on Thursday night saying that he would commit to a peaceful transfer of power, and he called for healing and reconciliation. But later, Wolf, we're told that it appeared that the president regretted filming that video. Remarkable that amid all of the things that the president has done these last several days, that video is what the president is having second thoughts about.
Yeah, and he was forced to read the script of that video. He didn't want to do it. Ryan, just set the scene one more time for us. Tomorrow morning, what's going to happen, and then what happens Tuesday and Wednesday, assuming that Pence does not invoke the 25th Amendment?
Yes, Wolf, tomorrow morning, Speaker Pelosi will bring to the floor a resolution that she'll ask unanimous consent for that essentially creates a trigger for them to begin the process of impeaching President Trump. That is a resolution that is going to ask Vice President Mike Pence to clearly stand where clearly state where he stands as it relates to the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President says that he's not ready to begin that process or just doesn't respond at all within that 24-hour window, then Tuesday morning, the House Democrats will begin the impeachment process here on Capitol Hill. Wolf.
And they could have a vote very quickly, and there seems to be no doubt that the majority, it's a simple majority to impeach 218 votes. No doubt they would have that, right?
It certainly seems that way, Wolf. There's a growing list of Democrats who are on the record saying that they will support the impeachment process. And there's also even a groundswell among Republicans here on Capitol Hill. Certainly not the majority of Republican members, but we are seeing more and more Republicans say that they are open to the idea of supporting impeachment. That's important here on the House side to a certain extent. It's even more important on the Senate side because it would require a 2/3 vote of the Senate to convict President Trump and remove him from office. It doesn't appear that the numbers are there quite yet, but if this snowball continues rolling down the hill over the next couple of days, we don't know where it would end up.
If Trump is impeached, he would be the first president in American history to be impeached by the House of Representatives twice. All right, guys, I know you're working your sources. We're going to get back to you, Ryan Nobles, Jeremy Diamond. Thank you very much. Joining us now, Republican Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina. She's a new Congresswoman. Thank you so much. Congratulations. I know these have been extremely painful, difficult days for you coming to Washington. Are you okay? First of all, I know you were terrified by what was happening back on Wednesday.
No, it was terrifying. I was devastated and heartbroken, and I'm just grateful to be home tonight with my children. I flew home Friday night. I had a security detail the entire way home, and I hugged and loved on them as hard and as long as I could. And I'm grateful that they just weren't with me. They were supposed to be up with me up there in D.C. this week because of COVID-19. My kids are not able to go to school. They do virtual school like many children across the country. But by Sunday night, hearing all the rhetoric and what was going on online and seeing the vitriol out there, it didn't feel safe. And I put my kids on the first flight home on Monday morning, and I'm just so grateful that my mom instincts kicked in and they weren't there to witness the destruction and the deaths that happened. It was a horrifying experience, something I could never imagine and never want to see ever happen again in this country.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's hard to believe this is happening in our nation's capital. All right, so let me get your response to what's going on right now in the House of Representatives. You heard Ryan's report. The Speaker wants the Vice President to invoke the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. What do you think?
Well, right now, I'm not even sure legally, and I was in some interviews yesterday whether they can, since a few of the cabinet members have resigned, if they would even be able to do that. So I do have a question on the legality of that. Regardless of what happens, what decision Vice President Mike Pence makes, I will support the vice president in whatever decision he makes. One of the issues that I have right now, whether it's the 25th Amendment, whether it's impeachment right now, is further dividing the country and pouring gasoline on a fire. I risked my life to take the vote on Wednesday night to certify the Electoral College. There are many of us out there that happened to. Our lives were, people were threatening us. I was accosted in the street on Tuesday night. And I worry about that because the impeachment articles, if it passes with a simple majority in the House, it needs 2/3 in the Senate. I don't know that there's an appetite for it there, but it doesn't get to the U.S. Senate until the 19th of January, the day before Joe Biden is sworn into office. And I think that for unity in this country, we need to be really thoughtful and careful about how do we go from here and how do we ensure that there is a peaceful transition of power, that the inauguration goes smoothly, so that we can get a fresh start starting on January 20th. I think that's really important for the American people right now.
So do you think the President of the United States should at least symbolically be punished by the House of Representatives, and you're a new member, for what he did?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I do believe, and I've talked to some of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle today, I do believe there's an appetite, whether that is censure or some other resolution or opportunity to move forward. And somebody's got to be held accountable, and we have to hold the president accountable for what happened. The rhetoric leading up to this vote, the lies that were told to the American people, this is what happens. Rhetoric has real consequences, and people died. And so I will support that effort to have a genuine effort to really look at what happened and hold those accountable. It wasn't just the president, though. There were other people, even in my own party, that ratcheted up their rhetoric, that got these folks riled up and helped influence and inspire the violence that transpired on this horrific event on Wednesday. And I think that's important, too, to recognize. But Wednesday's event isn't the only violent event in our country. We've seen violence across the nation over the last 9 months. I think it's really important for us, Republicans and Democrats, to really look in the mirror and, one, acknowledge that we have a problem in this country. That's the first step. The second is that we all need to take responsibility for our words and our actions. And going forward, from this day forward, we need to make a promise to the American people that we will be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And I know that the anger and frustration people have in this country are on both sides of the aisle because they hate seeing things politicized. I really want to be thoughtful about it, but I support censure. I support any way that we can hold our president accountable and others who led up to this, who are responsible for this destruction on Wednesday.
Yeah, I assume if there were, instead of an impeachment resolution, if there were a censure resolution, it would get overwhelming support right away. A lot of all the Democrats and a lot of Republicans would like to censure this president for what he did, for what he said in causing this pain that developed last Wednesday. But if the option is only, let's say Pence does not invoke the 25th Amendment, if the option is only to vote yay or nay, yes or no, on a resolution, an impeachment resolution, how do you think you'll vote?
Well, right now, that isn't going to be the only option, because I know that there are censure documents that are being filed or being drafted right now by Democrats, both in the Senate and in the House. So I believe we will have more than one option. Right now, I feel like that's going to put more gasoline on the fire. I worry about the effects of that going forward and how that will further divide our country. But I believe in the Constitution. I've always voted with the Constitution. I will look at what is presented to us and how it's going to be deliberated, what evidence is presented, and we'll vote based on the Constitution and what's presented before us in anything that I do, in any of these options.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy you're okay. I know you're going to be careful. Your kids obviously were very, very worried. We'll see you back here in Washington. Stay safe out there.